Hello there. Welcome to our mini podcast. I am Lisa Leight. I'm VP of Marketing here at Convoso, and I am joined once again by the Czar, Eric Troutman of TCPA World. Eric, welcome.
Thanks, Lisa. Really good to be here. As always, you are a fantastic host. I love Convoso, and I love me some Lisa. So let's get going.
Well, thank you. And we always love having you because although it's always a mixed blessing. You enlighten us, but you also give us more reasons to cringe and wrinkle our forehead. So we've talked about other state laws in the past. Actually, just a couple weeks ago at a roadshow, we were getting a rundown of the different states. We were talking about Florida. We were talking about Oklahoma. And today we wanted to do a deep dive into Michigan's Mini-TCPA bill, not yet a law, but can you enlighten us about what's happening in Michigan?
Yeah, so Michigan is following suit along with Florida and Oklahoma, Washington, and other states. Now, they're going to come forward with their own comprehensive TCPA sort of bill. Now, this is different, though, than the bills we're seeing in other states. It's more comprehensive. There's more to it than really any other state law that we've seen. So this is like a kind of like an omnibus rule where they're trying to do things regarding TCPA, regarding automated calling, pre-recorded calling, DNC calling, and then telesales too. So you're also looking at the content of calls. You're looking also at spoofing, and there's a remarkably powerful private right of action. But even more powerful, I think, is the power that's given to the AG's office out there in Michigan. And I don't view that as a surprise because, in fact, the AG's office there in Michigan is really taking the lead in the 50-state anti-robocall AG task force. So it doesn't surprise me that the legislature is about to give the AG's office over there really a powerful private right of action and a powerful investigatory device through the use of depositions and other forms of seeking information under oath before a case is even filed. Really pretty unique, pretty powerful.
Really, so really putting a lot more teeth into it should this then go on to become a law.
Yeah, so for instance, I mean, in most states, right, you get a CID, right, civil investigative demand. Here, you might get a deposition notice, right? Not only do we want you to produce records, we want you to come down here and provide testimony before a case is even filed. It's very unusual. You don't see that.
Interesting. So let's dive in. Tell us a little bit about what this bill it covers and what's allowable, not allowable under it.
Yeah, so there's a lot to it, Lisa, and we did a breakdown, of course, on tcpaworld.com, so I do hope you take a look. But let's just go through some of the high points. First, if you're using pre-recorded calls for any marketing purpose to consumers in Michigan, that is not going to be allowed without express written consent. That's not really a big departure. We already see that same rule at the federal level, so no big deal there. Zooming out, though, when we start thinking about what an auto dialer is, the Michigan rule includes a definition of what's called an ADAD, which is an automatic dialing and announcement device. The ADAD. It's interesting because the ADAD language is actually language that predates the TCPA. Back in the 70s and 80s, ADAD statutes existed in California and some other states that later switched, of course, to ATDS at the federal level. But Michigan uses the old school definitions, the old school lingo, really not definitions, but it adopts the same definition as Florida and Oklahoma. So if you're using a system that has the ability to select numbers automatically, that is going to be an ADAD in Michigan. Now, mercifully, the rules restricting the use of ADAD in Michigan are going to be lower. Remember, in Florida, you can't use an auto dialer for any purpose, essentially, that deals with marketing without express written consent. And that's a big change for a lot of folks. In Michigan, that's not true. ADADs are only restricted, one, of course, if you're calling without consent, to numbers on the DNC, and then to vulnerable numbers, including those belonging to individuals who are over 75 years of age. So there's a different level of protection that's being afforded to certain levels of phone numbers in Michigan. The ADAD definition does not apply to all of your marketing calls the way it would in Florida. So that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Continuing on through some of the rules, the TSR component is very interesting. There's a huge number of little ticky-tack rules that are going to apply to the content of your messaging, how many times you're allowed to call, and what you can say in your calls. Like Florida, you're limited to 3 attempts in a 24-hour period. Also, like Florida, you have to have calls that are, they have to stop at 8 p.m. in the local time zone. You can't use any form of misleading information. You can't lie. You can't cheat. You can't steal. That's all fine with
Mm-hmm.
me.
Good.
Also, though, there are required disclosures that you're going to have right out of the gate, right? Whenever you're talking to somebody in Michigan, identifying your first and last name, who you're working for, and what your business is, why you're calling. So those are just kind of a few of the high points, but go ahead, Lisa.
Are those required disclosures in the 3x in 24 hours? Does that apply? That applies to everybody, not just the vulnerable individuals?
That is correct. Now, one nice switch, though, although it does apply to all calls,
Mm-hmm.
if you have consent, you can blow past the timing requirement in Michigan, although you can't blow past the timing requirement in Florida. So that's a good thing. But all calls, regardless of whether or not there are consented, you're going to have to be talking and thinking about these disclosure requirements, right? That's got to be built into your practices there in Michigan.
Okay. Okay. And then say a little bit more about what constitutes vulnerable individuals. You mentioned the 75 age range.
Yeah, so there's 2 definitions in the statute. One is vulnerable numbers,
Mm-hmm.
and one is vulnerable individuals.
Okay.
It's pretty interesting the way those 2 are split up. Vulnerable numbers include any emergency telephone line, the hospitals, the old folks' homes, things like that. The vulnerable individuals are going to be individuals who are 75 years of age and older, and those who have disabilities. Now, it's going to be very interesting because, of course, when you're making these outbound calls, you might not know if the person that you are calling has a disability or is a member of this vulnerable population. So obviously this bill is designed to protect people, right, who might otherwise be preyed upon by unscrupulous folks looking to abuse elders or abuse the disabled. It remains to be seen what the results will be for people who had no idea, right? They did not know they were calling an elderly
Mm-hmm.
person. They didn't know they were calling a disabled person. They weren't intending to inflict any kind of abuse on these people, and yet they're going to have to, reach to this higher standard without really understanding or knowing how it is that they can discern who these folks are. That's interesting, right? It raises some constitutional issues, some due process issues. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But for now, the law is written as the law is written.
Okay. And as it's written now, what are the fines that that would come to play if somebody violates it?
Yeah, tremendously high fines. I mean, it's almost as if these states are like just trying to top each other, right? So the minimum violation in an AG's action brought out there in Michigan is $25,000 per violation. And if you've got one of these vulnerable people involved, it's up to $75,000 for one call. This is craziness. There is also a private right of action. The private right of action is $1,000 per call, so twice as much as in the TCPA. And, just for fun, Lisa, attorney's fees are permitted. Now, there's an interesting little hook, though, to that private right of action. Not everyone has a private right of action. You have to have actually been harmed by the conduct. Again, it will be very interesting to see what the rulings are there. Does harm mean the same thing as harm in Article 3, concrete harm analysis? Or is it more of an economic harm, meaning that you had to have actually lost money because, for instance, somebody deceived you or lied to you or tricked you? Don't know, right? That's another thing we'll have to wait and find out, right? What is the hook for that private right of action? But where it applies, it's $1,000 per plus attorney's fees. And believe me, that attorney's fees provision is going to end up being a really big deal.
So where does it stand right now? It's a bill before the Congress in Michigan.
The House.
What do you the House? What do you think is going to come?
So in order for it to become law, it's very similar. They have a bicameral system there, just like at the federal level. So they have to pass both the House and the Senate and be signed by the governor to become law. I've got it on pretty good authority that this thing has legs. We anticipate that it will make it out of committee, that it will be passed in both the House and the Senate. There might be some modifications. As I discussed on the blog, there's a couple of little nits. I did a really kind of lengthy deep dive with Arvell over at Contact Center Compliance, and he kind of identified a few things. So there's a few things that aren't quite right. So there might be a couple of changes here or there, just to kind of fine tune. But I would anticipate this thing will be passed probably by the end of the year. So we've all got to be kind of paying attention. You remember in Florida, when it came into light, there was a July 1st effective date, and Governor DeSantis signed it into law on June 30th.
Yes.
So thanks for that.
Right.
Right,
Thank
we
you.
had no
Yes.
notice. I mean, we were following it on TCPA World, so we knew it was coming. But the vast majority of people had no idea that this thing was about to become the law. The Michigan bill. We're trying to do the same thing, trying to spread awareness, make sure everyone knows. There's no effective date identified currently. The bill seems to contemplate that it will come into being enforceable within about 90 days after it is passed. So it looks like there's going to be a window there, but we don't know. It has not actually been set that there would be an effective date and what that effective date would be. So we've got to keep paying attention. We, of course, will be monitoring the events out there in Michigan and provide an update as soon as we have them on tcpaworld.com.
Okay. And do you think this could be a kind of a sign of more things to come in terms of other state mini TCPA laws that just like Michigan pulled a lot of the things from the Florida mini TCPA, would you expect, you talked about the Michigan one as being, more exact and more well written that compared with previous laws. Do you think we're going to see more like this going forward?
Short answer is absolutely yes. The Michigan bill is the first of its kind. It is a comprehensive kind of an omnibus TCPA telecom telesales bill at the state level. It's the sort of thing that it took Congress and the FCC and the FTC and the TSR and the CFR 30 years to put together. And some staffers there in Michigan spent the time necessary to really kind of think through these issues. And again, there's some nits needed. It's not 100% there, but it's 90% there. And some folks spent a lot of time putting this together, right? The Florida bill, it was an amendment to an existing statute. It was kind of slapped together. It's garbage. The Oklahoma bill is the same thing. They just copied and pasted. There was really no thought put into it. This Michigan bill, I got to tell you, folks, somebody spent a lot of time. I mean, hundreds of hours putting this thing together. And again, it's pretty well drafted. It's very thoughtful. And I believe they will catch on like wildfire. This is likely to be the new standard that we're going to see across the states. I don't think that anyone's going to be copycatting Florida and Oklahoma anymore. Those bills are unconstitutional. They're sloppy. They're garbage. This bill, again, it's not perfect yet, but it is comprehensive. It is thoughtful. It is likely to pass constitutional muster on most fronts. The questionable application of, again, enhanced penalties for calls to people who have disabilities or who are elderly in the context of people who don't know they're calling that population. I'm not sure that's going to live up, to constitutional standards. But beyond that, it's a pretty good bill. So I do think, Lisa, we're going to be seeing this all over the place. I'm hoping that we don't start seeing it, cropping up faster than we can track it.
Right.
But I do think, we're going to see more of this.
Right. And, making sure as companies prepare for, making sure they're in compliance with all these ones, making sure that you can treat different numbers differently, making sure that you've got the technology to track, like you said, the no more than 3 times in a 24-hour period, and having required disclosures that are going to be different state by state. It sounds like it's an important one to make sure your technology platform can handle.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely critical. I mean, look, I go to all these conferences, and every time I start talking about state law, like people really start freaking out because it's like, man, it's hard enough to pay attention at the federal level. But what I tell people is relax, right? Assuming that you are using the proper technology platform vendors and partners, you're fine, because these rules are going to be built in, right, to the application of the platform for the most part. Now, there's going to be some things where you might have to adjust your calling settings. There might be some situations where you have to adjust the content of your calls, like we're talking about required disclosures, how you're using your DIDs and cycling and spoofing. There is an anti-spoofing provision we didn't talk about. But basic things like how many times you can call within what period of time and what the hours are, right? I mean, a good platform, of course, like Convoso's, can track all of that for you. So that takes the guesswork out, and that is, obviously, it's a critical compliance tool. If you didn't have that, you'd be kind of, dead in the face of 50 different states doing 50 different things.
That's great. Well, Eric, I want to thank you. Thank you for the information, and we will follow up as this moves closer to becoming a law. And again, thank you for all the helpful information.
Absolutely. Love to be with you, Lisa. Chat soon.
Okay.